Hi, I tell very exciting and horrifying stories to everyone. I suggest you subscribe because I post such stories every day. The Wishing Mirror. Chapter 1. The Antique Shop. Maya lived in a tiny apartment cluttered with half-finished canvases and tubes of paint. Bills piled up on the counter, and her inspiration had vanished months ago, leaving her teetering on the edge of giving up on her dreams. One rainy afternoon, she wandered aimlessly through the city, seeking distraction. On a narrow side street, a peculiar shop caught her eye. Its sign, worn and barely legible, read Curiosities and Relics. The window displayed an assortment of strange items: cracked porcelain dolls, old books with crumbling pages, and an ornate mirror that seemed to glow faintly even in the dim light. Drawn inside, Maya immediately felt an odd sensation, as if the air itself was alive. The mirror stood propped against a wall, larger and more striking up close. Its frame was carved with intricate symbols that seemed to twist and writhe the longer she looked at them. Beautiful, isn't it? The shopkeeper's voice startled her. He was a gaunt man with piercing eyes that seemed to look straight through her. How much? Maya asked, unable to take her eyes off the mirror. He hesitated, then spoke softly. You should know, it's not just a mirror. It grants wishes. But everything comes at a cost. Maya laughed nervously. Sure, like a genie in a bottle. Something like that, he said with a cryptic smile. But remember, once you start, you can't stop. Ignoring his warning, Maya paid for the mirror and had it delivered to her apartment. Chapter 2. The First Wish. That night, Maya hung the mirror in her living room. Exhausted, she plopped on her couch, staring at her blank canvas. I wish I had inspiration, she muttered absent-mindedly. The room grew colder, and the mirror's surface rippled, almost imperceptibly. Shaking off her unease, she went to bed. Her dreams were vivid, filled with images of vibrant landscapes and abstract patterns. When she woke, she felt a compulsion to paint. Hours passed in a blur as she created a stunning masterpiece, unlike anything she'd ever done before. The painting garnered instant attention online. A local gallery offered to feature it, and Maya felt her luck turning around. But that evening, as she admired the painting, she noticed something strange. In the mirror's reflection, the painting wasn't the same. The colors shifted and darkened, and shadowy figures seemed to emerge from the brushstrokes. She blinked, and the image returned to normal. Chapter 3. The Price of Desire. Buoyed by her newfound success, Maya made another wish. This time, she asked for fame and recognition. The mirror rippled again, and the air in her apartment felt heavy. Over the next week, her name spread like wildfire. Her work sold for thousands, and she was invited to high-profile events. But the success came with strange occurrences. Her best friend, Alex, was hit by a car and hospitalized. Another artist at the gallery mysteriously vanished. And every night, Maya noticed unsettling changes in the mirror. Her reflection sometimes moved independently, smiling when she didn't or staring back with hollow, black eyes. Desperate for answers, Maya delved into the mirror's origins. She found fragments of its history online, tracing it to a 17th century noblewoman who supposedly used it to curse her enemies. Each of its owners had met tragic ends, driven mad, or consumed by the mirror itself. Chapter 4. The Spiral. Determined to rid herself of the mirror, Maya tried selling it back to the antique shop. But when she returned, the shop was gone. The building was empty, its windows boarded up as if it had been abandoned for years. She tried throwing the mirror away, but it reappeared on her wall the next morning. Panicked, she covered it with a sheet, but she could still feel its presence, as if it were watching her. That night, she dreamed of a dark void where the mirror floated, surrounded by distorted faces that screamed silently. In the dream, the shopkeeper's voice echoed, "Once you start, you can't stop." Chapter 5. The Final Wish. Driven to the brink, Maya made one last wish. "I wish to destroy you." The mirror's surface erupted in a blinding light, and the symbols on the frame burned brightly. Her reflection stepped out of the mirror, identical but wrong. Its eyes were pitch black, and its smile was too wide. The reflection whispered, "You can't destroy what you've become." The apartment filled with a deafening hum as the reflection lunged at her. Maya screamed as the room twisted around her, the walls and ceiling bending and warping until she was pulled into the mirror itself. Epilogue. Days later, Maya's apartment was found empty, her paintings missing. The only trace of her was the mirror, now in perfect condition, left propped against the wall. A new tenant moved in, intrigued by the strange but beautiful mirror. They hung it in their bedroom, marveling at its craftsmanship. And late that night, they gazed into the mirror and muttered, "I wish." The Cursed Pendant. Chapter 1. The Heirloom. Sarah stood in the attic of her late grandmother's creaky, old house, sifting through piles of forgotten possessions. The air smelled of mildew and dust, and the dim light of a single bulb cast long shadows over the clutter. Among the yellowed letters and moth-eaten fabrics, Sarah found a small, velvet-lined box. Inside was an intricate pendant, a silver locket adorned with strange, swirling designs and a faintly glowing gemstone in its center. A note was tucked into the box, written in her grandmother's spidery handwriting. "This locket is a burden, not a gift. Wear it only if you wish to know the truth. But beware, the truth is never kind." Intrigued and dismissive of the warning, Sarah slipped the pendant around her neck. A chill spread across her chest as it settled against her skin, but she shrugged it off. Chapter 2. The Whispering Shadows. That night, Sarah dreamed vividly. She saw herself standing in a vast field under a black sky, surrounded by shadowy figures with glowing eyes. They murmured incomprehensible words, their voices low and urgent. When she woke, the whispers didn't fade. At first, they were faint, like the sound of leaves rustling in the wind, but soon they became louder, clearer. They called her name, urging her to do strange things. Go to the park, look under the bench, dig in the garden. Despite the fear creeping in her mind, Sarah followed the whispers, uncovering unsettling discoveries. A buried box of letters detailing a series of unsolved murders in her town, and a bloody handkerchief hidden in a tree hollow. Each time she followed the whispers, the pendant glowed brighter, and her life seemed to improve. At work, she was suddenly praised for her ideas. Old friends reached out to reconnect. But alongside these blessings came an eerie realization. People around her started to suffer misfortunes. Her coworker fell ill mysteriously. A neighbor's house caught fire. And in each incident, Sarah found herself uncomfortably close to the scene, as if the pendant was drawing her there. Chapter 3. The Pendant's Curse. Determined to understand the pendant's strange power, Sarah dug into her grandmother's history. Old journals and letters revealed a dark truth. The pendant was once owned by a man named Elias Crowley, a 19th century cult leader who used it to control his followers and commit ritual sacrifices. The pendant, she learned, was imbued with a piece of Crowley's soul, making it both a conduit for his power and a prison for his spirit. Anyone who wore the pendant gained a taste of its influence, but at a terrible cost. As Sarah read, the whispers grew louder, now tinged with malice. The shadows in her peripheral vision began to take shape, tall, gaunt figures with hollow eyes that loomed closer every time she looked away. One night, she tried to remove the pendant, but it wouldn't budge. It burned against her skin, leaving her screaming in agony. Chapter 4: The Final Sacrifice. The pendant's control over Sarah tightened. It began to dictate her actions, forcing her to isolate herself from friends and family. Her dreams were plagued by visions of Elias Crowley, his voice now echoing clearly in her mind. "You are the chosen one, the final vessel." Sarah realized the pendant was grooming her to continue Crowley's dark legacy. It compelled her to stand in the middle of a busy intersection, almost causing a deadly accident, and later led her to a dilapidated chapel in the woods where Crowley's cult once gathered. Desperate to break free, Sarah decided to destroy the pendant. She took a hammer to it, but the gemstone remained unscathed, glowing brighter with every strike. The whispers turned into screams, and the shadows fully emerged, encircling her. In a last-ditch effort, Sarah set fire to the pendant, using gasoline and a lighter. As the flames consumed the locket, the shadows screamed and lunged at her. The room exploded in a flash of light, and Sarah passed out. Epilogue: Sarah woke up in a hospital bed, her memory hazy. When she looked down, her neck was bare. The pendant was gone, and the whispers had vanished. Relieved but wary, she returned to her grandmother's house to find it eerily silent. In the charred remains of the attic, she found the pendant, completely intact, its gemstone glowing faintly. Despite every instinct telling her to walk away, she picked it up. As she did, the whispers returned, soft but insistent. "Wear it. You know you must." And against her will, her hands moved to clasp it around her neck once more. The Devil's Typewriter. Chapter 1: The Discovery. Jack Merritt was a washed-up journalist. Once the golden boy of investigative reporting, he now barely scraped by writing obituaries for the local paper. His small apartment was cluttered with empty coffee cups and crumpled drafts of articles that would never see the light of day. One Saturday morning, Jack wandered through the flea market near his building. Tucked between booths of old records and mismatched furniture, he found an antique typewriter, black with ornate gold lettering spelling out Malachi 7. Interested, the seller, a jittery older man, asked nervously. "How much?" Jack inquired. $10. But listen, the man leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Don't use it after midnight. Trust me." Jack smirked, brushing off the warning as a sales gimmick. He handed over the cash and lugged the heavy typewriter home. Chapter 2: Midnight Typing. That evening, Jack set up the typewriter on his desk, marveling at its pristine keys. Despite its age, it worked flawlessly. He decided to give it a spin, hoping to spark some creativity. At first, he typed aimlessly, but soon words seemed to flow effortlessly, almost as if the machine guided his fingers. Within hours, Jack had completed a gripping short story, a chilling tale about a murder in a small town. Satisfied, Jack went to bed. The next morning, he was startled to see his story trending online. He didn't remember posting it, but chalked it up to sleep-deprived inspiration. Later that day, A news report caught his eye. A local murder eerily similar to the one in his story had occurred. The details matched exactly, down to the color of the victim's shoes. Chapter 3. The stories turned sinister. Unnerved but intrigued, Jack sat down to write again, this time about a bank robbery gone wrong. As he typed, the keys felt warm under his fingers, almost alive. The story practically wrote itself. The next morning, news broke of a robbery that ended in a bloodbath, just as Jack had described. Terrified, Jack tried to stop using the typewriter, but every time he moved it or put it away, it reappeared on his desk, waiting for him. One night, he woke to the sound of typing in his apartment. When he approached the desk, he saw the typewriter working on its own, hammering out the details of a tragic plane crash. Hours later, the news reported a passenger flight had gone down. Jack realized the typewriter wasn't just predicting events, it was causing them. Chapter 4. The Typewriter's Origins. Determined to uncover the truth, Jack researched the Malachi 7 label. He found whispers of a cursed typewriter created by a deranged inventor in the early 20th century. The machine was said to be a conduit for demonic power, granting its users success in exchange for destruction. Jack's investigation led him to an old photo of the inventor, who bore an uncanny resemblance to the flea market seller. As Jack delved deeper, he found records of the typewriter's previous owners, writers, journalists, and poets, all of whom met tragic ends. The stories they wrote became real, each leading to greater chaos. Chapter 5. The Spiral. The typewriter demanded more. Jack found himself unable to resist the urge to write, even as he fought against it. The stories it produced grew darker. Mass tragedies, gruesome murders, apocalyptic scenarios. Jack tried destroying the machine, smashing it with a hammer and throwing it into a river, but it always returned to his desk, pristine and waiting. The typewriter began writing on its own, typing out events before they occurred. Jack became a prisoner in his own home, terrified of what it might write next. Chapter 6. The Final Chapter. One night, the typewriter produced its most chilling story yet, a detailed account of Jack's own death. It described him sitting at his desk, frantically typing as shadows crept closer, eventually engulfing him. Desperate, Jack tried to burn the typewriter, using every accelerant he could find. The flames consumed it, and for a moment he thought he'd won. But as the fire died down, the typewriter stood intact, its keys clicking ominously. The final words it typed before Jack disappeared. The end is only the beginning. Epilogue. Jack was never seen again. Weeks later, a new tenant moved into his apartment. Among the furniture left behind, they found a pristine black typewriter. The first thing they typed was a simple sentence. "I wonder what stories you can tell me." And late that night, as the clock struck midnight, the typewriter began to hum.